A German tank commander lifts his head to the periscope and sees the world turn milky. The Panther is not on fire. Nothing has punched through the front plate. Yet the vision blocks bloom white, and the air inside the turret sharpens, a hot, acrid pressure that makes every breath feel wrong. Voices rise on the intercom, clipped and tight. The loader swears, the gunner asks for a target he can no longer see, and the commander wonders whether the next gust through the ventilator will bring smoke, heat, or both. Outside, somewhere in the haze, an American 75 has already reloaded. The trick is simple, the effect is not. Seconds stretch, and those seconds are where battles tilt. White phosphorus was never a magic anti-tank round. It could not bite through steel the way a capped armor-piercing shot might. Its talent was speed and chemistry, a fill that ignites on contact with air, seeding the target area with burning particles and a dense, white cloud. That cloud became a screen in an instant, faster than conventional smoke. It clung to surfaces, it hid silhouettes, it crawled through gaps and found ventilation. In a tank fight, where vision and timing rule, a screen that arrives now and carries heat as a passenger is a weapon, even if the manual calls it smoke. American crews learned this in the grind of 1944. The 75mm M64 Smoke WP shell lived in their racks as a utility round, meant for marking, signaling, masking a field. Doctrine said so, but doctrine is a flaw, not a ceiling. Under the turret bustle and across the intercom, crews learned to do something else, put a smoke round straight onto a tank, strike the face, splash the front plate, blind the optics, let the fumes pour where men must breathe. When the cloud curls into the turret through whatever opening war has left, the crew inside must weigh one choice against another. They can sit inside a blind machine and wait for the follow-up armor-piercing shot, or they can kick open the hatch and wage a sprint against shrapnel. Not every crew stayed. Enough did not to make a pattern. Listen to the language crews used. They did not speak of sorcery or secret science. They spoke about buying time. Fire smoke closed the distance. Fire armor piercing. The first round makes the second round possible. When visibility collapses, the side with the plan already in motion holds the advantage. The Sherman's 75, with its steady rate of fire and stabilizer that was imperfect but useful at short ranges, became a machine that could exploit those bought seconds. The Panther facing it was formidable at range, with a gun that could kill before a Sherman could reply. But at short distance, with the German crew disoriented and the gunner hunting in a white fog, angles changed. Command decisions narrowed. The American side began to dictate the pace. The chemistry mattered. White phosphorus burns hot, but it also creates pentoxide smoke that sucks moisture from air and lungs, an irritant that punishes exposed skin and eyes. The effect inside a metal box is not theatrical flame, it is pressure on the senses, a sharpened sting, the cough that breaks discipline. Optics are treated glass. A sticky, burning speck that lands on a periscope face does not melt a tank, but it does obscure the channel through which a gunner aims. Wipe it in panic and smear the view worse. Leave it and aim blind. None of this guarantees a bailout, yet it creates a decision point where coolness must fight the body and where training must overcome the hiss of smoke and the thud of impacts. American ammunition racks reflected a pragmatic mix: high explosive for dug-in guns, walls and infantry, armor-piercing for tanks and hard targets, smoke, including WP, for marking and masking. The M64's design gave it its surprise. When used aggressively, its quick blooming cloud and hot fragments could oppress a crew rather than just hide a hillside. In after-action accounts, the language is often indirect. Reports tally tanks destroyed or abandoned, note smoke employed, and describe enemy crews leaving machines that remain otherwise intact. Historians reading across many such pages began to trace a practice, a fieldcraft. Use WP to blind and unnerve, then move while the enemy hesitates, and finish with steel. Now moved to Lorraine in September 1944, the open country around Arracourt, where fog pooled at dawn and fields ran long between scattered hedgerows. There, the 4th Armoured Division fought a series of sharp, armoured clashes against German forces that fielded Panthers in numbers. The weather often favoured the defender or the side willing to close unseen. American leaders leaned into smoke. Mortars and artillery laid curtains that isolated pockets. Tanks carried their own fog in brass cases. If the morning gave mist, the Americans thickened it. If the day cleared, they made their own. What matters for our story is not a single celebrated duel, but a rhythm. The US approach, honed by trial and briefing, was to seize seconds, deny sightlines, and turn technical inferiority at range into opportunity at 100 yards. Imagine a troop of Shermans holding in a shallow fold. Reports warn of Panthers advancing from a tree line. The order goes, smoke first. A gunner puts a WP round onto the lead Panther's glacis. The burst does not harm the plate, but a snowball of white races across the face, crawling over the driver's visor and the gunner's sight hood. The German crew hears the bloom and feels the turret air change as the ventilator works, drawing in outside atmosphere to feed the engine and clear powder gases. In those seconds, the American commander calls advance. The stabilizer hums. The second American round is armor-piercing, and now it is the one that matters. A clean shot into the lower plate if angle allows, or a shot into the mantelet to wedge fragments into the turret. If the Panther crew has stayed buttoned and blind, the first good hit is more likely to be American. If the Panther commander has opened his hatch to see above the haze, he accepts a sniper's world of risk. Either way, the minutes remain cruel, but the seconds have been bought. The point is not that WP forced every German crew to flee. Records do not speak with one voice, and armoured men are stubborn. Some stayed, fought blind and killed. Others delayed only to be caught by the next shot. But the accounts that filter through veteran talk and sober summaries show a real, repeatable advantage in combining smoke with manoeuvre. The tactic's reputation grew precisely because it was a multiplier, not because it replaced the need for armor-piercing rounds. It turned a duel into a rush. It rewarded crews that could reload fast, communicate cleanly, and drive decisively under partial cover. Outside the tanks, White Phosphorus played yet another game. The Chemical Warfare Service had fielded 4.2-inch mortars in battalions designed to throw smoke and high explosive farther and thicker than infantry could on its own. On a battlefield like Lorraine, those mortars wrote white walls where commanders needed them. A company could advance behind a screen that the enemy's gunners could not easily penetrate with their eyes. Artillery delivered WP too, marking targets and creating pockets where visibility was lopsided. When combined with the tank-level trick of splashing a vehicle's face, the result was a pattern of one-way mirrors. From one side, you saw enough. From the other, you saw shapes and guesses. Legal and ethical lines existed even then, though far less formal than later treaties would set. White phosphorus was a smoke and marking agent by designation, and its use against equipment and in open battle lines aligned with the manuals. The modern world draws firmer distinctions about incendiaries and civilians, but the armoured exchanges of 1944 and 1945 live in a separate frame. The point here is to describe doctrine as practiced, not to romanticize incandescence. Crews were not arsonists. They were pragmatists, using every lever to make enemies leave machines that were otherwise too hard to crack on schedule. Where did this leave the Panthers and Tigers, the beasts that every memoir seems to fear? Still dangerous. still able to kill Shermans brutally when range and angle favored them. A WP hit did not melt a tiger's heart out through the glacis. What it did was turn the duel into a test of composure as well as steel. The tiger's thick plate could ignore a spreading constellation of burning dots on its skin. Its crew could not ignore blindness, nor could it ignore the fact that the next incoming round was no longer smoke. Over and over the lesson repeated, tanks fight with vision. Take the vision and you take their speed of thought. Within American units, word of the method spread in the way such things always do. A crew tries something, a platoon sees it work, a captain writes a few lines in an informal circular, or a staff talk mentions a case. Other crews adopt it, especially those who expect to meet Panthers head-on. In the cold print of debriefs and studies, the phrasing stays careful. Smoke employed. Enemy abandoned several vehicles undamaged. Consolidated positions taken after rapid approach. Between the lines, an image hardens of men who learned to press an advantage measured in heartbeats rather than inches of armor. The Lorraine fights also teach the flip side. White phosphorus did not solve every problem. In rain, the cloud behaved differently. In wind, a screen could blow back on the user. At too long a range, a WP splash on armor might scatter into the air without clinging where it mattered. Against veteran crews who drilled under pressure, the bailout was less likely. In villages or tangled hedgerows, angles and cover changed the calculus again. The trick worked best when a Sherman could fire, move, and fire again, while the target was still processing the first shock. Consider the German perspective not as caricature but as human reaction. Inside the turret, the gunner needs his line of sight. He trusts his periscope and the commander's orders. When smoke swallows the aiming world, he can either slew by guesswork or wait for the commander to find a way to see. The loader, whose job is rhythm, feels the tempo break. He reaches for the next round as heat flickers in peripheral vision. The driver hears the engine note change and feels blind as well. These are professionals, but even professionals grip their tasks tighter when sensation turns harsh. Meanwhile, outside, a Sherman is closing and another is peeling to the flank. Momentum is changing hands. There is also a material trail. Tanks abandoned under pressure sit on the field, their engines dead, their armor unpunctured, their optics scorched, and their interiors coated in a whisper of smoke residue. Recovery teams catalogue them. Intelligence officers open hatches and climb in, noses wrinkling at the sharp tang that lingers. Notes go into files. So do photographs of periscopes with clouded faces and turret fans that have drawn in what the battlefield offered. None of this is spectacular. It is the humbler work of understanding cause and effect. One reason the story has been misunderstood is that it sounds too neat in retelling. Say, White Phosphorus made German crews jump from Panthers, and you run the risk of implying inevitability. The real shape is messier. The tactic worked often enough to be written about, but not so perfectly that it turned every duel into a walkover. It was most compelling in the specific conditions of late 1944 combat: mixed visibility, short ranges, aggressive American maneuver, and German formations that included many replacement crews. Against veterans or in clear long-range gunnery duels, the Panthers' strengths reasserted themselves. The record is best read with that in mind. So why did American crews keep M64 rounds close? Because war rewards tools. That shape time, a conventional smoke grenade thrown by infantry, builds its curtain in a half-minute. An artillery smoke mission takes coordination and minutes more. A white phosphorus shell from a tank puts its screen on the exact square of earth or face of armor you care about right now. It is the immediacy that makes it tactical. It is also the immediacy that makes it unnerving for whoever is on the receiving end. Fear is not an argument here. It is simply a factor alongside heat and sting and the loss of sight. The scene with mortars deserves another pass. The 4.2-inch chemical mortars were workhorses whose shells could blanket crossroads and ridge lines so thoroughly that the battlefield's geometry changed. Under that blanket, tanks and infantry moved like actors, stepping backstage. They crossed open ground that would otherwise be death space. They formed up for assaults within yards of the line. They made flanking actions possible, and when the screens thinned, tank gunners could add a local burst of WP right where an enemy machine threatened to break the spell. The combined effect was harmony between echelons, big smoke to rewrite the map, little smoke to force a crew's hand. By the winter of 1944, this harmony had become an expectation. The Americans were not the only army to use WP, but their system of mortars, artillery, and tank smoke worked together unusually well. It reflected a culture that favored initiative at lower levels, giving crews permission to solve problems with the tools at hand. It also reflected the cold arithmetic that a disabled enemy tank is almost as good as a destroyed one when the clock is your enemy. A Panther left by its crew is a heavy paperweight so long as the field remains in your hands. You can bypass, finish later, or tow it if you must. The shell that convinced the crew to step out did its job, even if the armor is unscarred. There is a temptation to search for a single textbook clash that proves the case beyond argument. Better to accept the cumulative method. Look at the way officers wrote about smoke in tactical digests. Look at how often crews mention using smoke to close and then switching to armor piercing. Listen to how the men who fought describe the relief of seeing an enemy tank crew spill out and run because the next hits did not have to fight plate and angle anymore. That relief is not the same as cruelty. It is relief that a problem has changed shape from metal to motion. The epilogue belongs to perspective. White phosphorus later became a subject of legal debate, particularly concerning urban warfare and civilians. The battlefield of 1944 was a different theatre, and the shells in question were employed within the category of smoke and marking as well as, at times, incendiary effect. None of this excuses carelessness, it explains practice. The story here is narrowly about armor versus armor and how a round labeled smoke could, in trained hands, make a steel predator blink. Return to that first commander, watching his vision turn white. He has trained for this. He keeps the hatch shut because the next round might be the one that matters. He orders the gunner to traverse by bearing. He steadies his voice. If he holds, he may get a shot when the fog peels. But outside, the enemy has already decided not to wait. The American tank that fired the smoke has shifted, its driver feeling the engine's pull, its commander calling the angle. Another gun in the troop keeps up the pressure, adding more smoke or throwing high explosive to pin. The field of view has become American time. The next clang on the Panther's face is different, a deep iron note that means impact, not splash. The decision window has closed. What remains after the shot is not a boast about superweapons. It is an appreciation for how small, lawful tools, shells with smoke fills, mortars whose entire purpose is to paint the air, can be combined to create options. The M64 did not win Lorraine by itself. It made something else possible, a moment where an American crew could change the terms of a fight. Across the campaign, those moments piled up. They look modest on paper. They feel decisive in the turret. Even myths have a seed, and the seed here is the memory of crews who watched big cats yield ground, not to penetration, but to pressure. Over time, the tail inflated into a white-hot terror that forced every hatch open. Strip the legend down and you still have a tactic that mattered, grounded in chemistry, fieldcraft, and the human responses that make war so difficult to predict. The shell bursts, the world whitens, men choose, and in those choices, steel without a crew becomes simply a vehicle waiting for a new owner. Think of the roads after the fight. A panther sits askew in a ditch, no gaping holes, just scorched streaks on its face and a fine dusting in the turret that leaves a taste on the tongue. There is a Sherman nearby with powder stains around the muzzle, its crew uncoiling, glancing back with the small astonishment that accompanies surviving a close exchange. Around them, the fog lifts. The field reveals tracks and churned earth. The diary a sergeant writes that night will not mention White Phosphorus by name. It will mention smoke, a rush, a hit, and the curious stillness of a machine left behind because the men inside made another choice. A last note belongs to humility. The men who discovered and refined the trick did not imagine it as an end. They imagined it as a beginning, a way to create an opening. They knew that if the follow-up shot missed, all they had done was irritate a very dangerous enemy. They practiced until the sequence felt inevitable. Smoke, move, aim, finish. They were not always right, but they were often right enough to carry villages, ridges, and crossroads one field at a time. And that is the true shape of it, not gore and not myth, but tactics. A tool meant for masking became in the hands of crews who understood sight and fear a lever. With it, they pried crews out of steel that was otherwise too strong for the clock they lived under. With it, they turned the physics of optics and air into a battlefield argument that favored them for just long enough. With it, they made Panthers and Tigers hesitate. In the harsh arithmetic of armored war, hesitation is a wound. It is a space where the next round finds its mark, where a column slides forward, where a campaign shifts by inches. White smoke in a turret is not spectacular. It is only decisive in the oldest way, by forcing men to decide faster than comfort allows.